Hello chess variant fans! So in the last videos I went over a series of chess variants that used a bunch of hybrid pieces, specifically knight hybrid pieces. So for example, combining the knight with the bishop to make the archbishop, or combining the knight with the rook to make the chancellor. And if you need a reminder, those variants were Capablanca chess, Grand chess, S chess, and Shogun chess. You can find links to them here. These are very different pieces and open up a whole different set of tactics. So as I mentioned in the how to play video, for example, the archbishop controls squares like this, which gives it very regional control. On top of it also has these diagonals that go out there. It gives you a very different field of control than a similar piece such as the queen. The chancellor also has a very unique set of moves that looks something like this. And it's just a matter of pattern recognition, so you can recognize their strong spots and weak spots. Since Shogun chess is also in this group, I'll also be covering a third hybrid piece, which combines the move of the king with the knight to create a piece called the general. So I'll be covering that at the end of the video, but that's fairly unique to Shogun chess. So in terms of strength, these hybrid pieces are all similar to the queen, because the queen is also a hybrid piece combining the bishop and the rook, and that's typically valued as a 9. The exact values of these pieces are not well defined, but they're estimated to be somewhere near the queen, with the chancellor coming slightly weaker than the queen, the archbishop also slightly weaker than the chancellor, and then the general is assumed to be slightly weaker than the archbishop. These changes are very minimal, and I think the value kind of depends on the setup of the board. As you'll see, these new pieces, the knight rook and knight bishop hybrids, have the ability to check the king without being blocked, and that opens up a whole slew of checkmate tactics where one of these pieces could end up delivering checkmate by themselves without any help. And throughout this video, I'll be using different examples from the different games, so you'll see different board sizes or even different names, for example, the hawk for the archbishop or the elephant for the chancellor. So if you're confused about any of these, just refer to one of the rules videos. But just for example, I can just change the piece set over here, and you'll see that these guys are the same. And there are also a bunch of different other piece sets that can represent these pieces. Here's a very basic example of an archbishop delivering checkmate on its own. I'll give you a couple seconds to figure out what the next best move is. So if you move the archbishop here, this attacks the king through its knight move, but also cuts off any escape route. Also, this pawn didn't even need to be here, so if this was the same situation, again it's checkmate, as these two spots are covered, as well as these two spots, the king is still stuck. Here's a great example from S chess of the hawk's ability to exert regional dominance. So this is mate in 2, I'll give you a second to figure it out. So first move, hawk to e3, checking the king, and it also blocks off his escape route to the f-file, so the king can only move to h1. And then finishing it off with hawk to f2. Again, this attacks the king and blocks off his escape route. Here's an example from a drop game, S-House, where black has a hawk in hand. Can you figure out what the best move is? So here black could take his hawk and drop it on d3. This immediately threatens the king, and also cuts off his attack route, so he has no choice but to kill the hawk. Black retakes, and now it's checkmate. Here's a basic example of a chancellor delivering mate on its own. This one's fairly straightforward. You move the chancellor to here to b7. It attacks the king through its knight attack, but then also blocks off its escape route over there. Here's an example of an interesting mating pattern from S chess. It's mate in 2. Can you figure it out? I'll give you a second to pause. So what white has to do is just move his elephant to d8, attacking the king. The king can only escape to h7, and then finally the elephant moves to f8, attacking the king, threatening his escape route, and also covering his back rank. Here's another neat example of the elephant being able to deliver a mate on its own. This one is mate in 2. I'll give you a second to figure it out. We'll start off with queen takes g1, immediately checking the king. The knight retakes, and then finally the elephant goes to h2, attacks the king, and blocks off its escape route. Finally, I'm going to wrap up this video with some examples of the general. And as a reminder, the general combines movements of the king with the knight. So, for example, the white general over here can attack all these squares around it like a king, and then jump to all these squares like a knight. This piece is kind of like a bulldozer in a sense that it exerts a lot of control around its area. If you look at this 5x5 area around the general, it already controls so many of these squares. So once it gets to where it needs to go, it could very easily deliver checkmate. Although not as powerful as the archbishop or the chancellor, once it's near the enemy king is almost as good as done for. Here's an example of a nice mating sequence. Here white plays knight to g6, creating a general, and then blocking off the king. At this point, there's really nothing black can do because white is threatening mate in multiple ways. So first, white can move his archbishop to e7, or e6, and that would be checkmate. The other option is archbishop to e7. That's the same thing, checkmate. And then finally, the third option is general to g7. So at this point, there's nothing black can do. This game is a good example illustrating the rule of where you can only have one major piece at a time. The best move for black here would be to sacrifice his current general to take that rook. And if white retakes with the queen, then you just create a new general. And at this point, white is lost. If he tries to escape over here, then you just move the general. If white escapes over here, then you just move the general over here. The king runs over here. And then finally, general to f3 is checkmate. The king cannot run there, because of the knight ability. And the rest of these 4 squares are covered by the king ability of the general. Okay, here's one more example. This one is mate in 3. I'll give you a couple seconds to pause and figure this out. So here the first move would be to sacrifice the queen. King retakes, and then now black can promote his knight into a general. King has to retreat back because he has nowhere else to go. And then finally, the general delivers single-handedly checkmate. So those are some basic examples to get you familiarized with these pieces and recognize some basic checking and checkmate patterns. So if you'd like to see more videos about variants and pieces like this, don't forget to like and subscribe.